Hi, so in this video, I'll teach you how you can figure out the cognitive functions and specific stack associated with a four-letter type in the MBTI and conversely. In order to understand the video, you should have, a basic familiarity with the general concepts of the MBTI, maybe know a few types, and know that cognitive functions are a thing, because that's why you'd want to know how to find them in the first place. So first, let's start with a few basic rules from which we'll be able to deduce one from the others. Okay, so first let's understand what each of the four letters in a type stand for, right? You probably already know this, but I'll just go over it quickly. So the first is whether the type is introverted or extroverted. I'll refer to the general spectrum, I guess, as the energy polarity. That's not really an official name, but it'll be easier than to just mention extroverted or introverted every time. Then we have the perceiving preference, which can be for intuition or sensing. Then we have the judging preference, which can be for feeling or thinking. And lastly, we've got the preference for judging or perceiving. So this spectrum between intuition and sensing, this category, right, is perceiving, and the category of feeling and thinking are judging functions, right? And so basically, these four functions, well, these four symbols are what creates functions once they are paired with an energy polarity, so introverted or extroverted. And so another thing that's important to understand is that every single function works in pairs. So basically what you'll have is pairs will work within the same type. So you have pairs of judging functions and pairs of perceiving functions, and it'll be one of each from the different energy polarity. So you'll have one that's extroverted and the other that's introverted. So to be more specific, if we start in the alphabetical order, we'll have FE, which will be paired with TI, always. FI will be paired with TE. And then we have NE, which will be paired always with SI, and NI with SE. Okay, so these functions will always be associated within a type, right? They always work one with the other. And you've got one of each, right? We've got one function of each of these different letters, but what changes is which polarity, so introverted or extroverted. That's what changes, and the placement. So now it's time to talk about the different places within the stack. So, as you may know, there's such a thing as a cognitive stack, and or rather the function stack, and so it has four different functions in a specific order. So I'll use the type I use at the beginning as an example. So INFP. The first function is the dominant function. We have the auxiliary function, the tertiary function, and the inferior function. What I want to stress in this portion is that basically you've got two pairs within this stack. So you've got the outer pair, or you could say the dominant pair, right? And then you have the inner pair. I mean, those are not specific, like official terms, right? But it's just, you'll have always one pair that's on the outside extremity, we could say, right? So Fi and Te, which are always go together, are in both of those positions. And Ni and Si, which are Ne and Si, which always go together, are in this middle part. So to give an example of a different type, if we use an extroverted counterpart to the INFP, so the ENFP, then we still keep the same functions, but they're in a different order. And as you can see, we still have this pair is still in this two positions. So you always have one item of the pair will be in the first slot on the dominant function will always be paired with the inferior function, and the auxiliary and tertiary will always be linked together. Right. And so the last rule, but we already have everything we need, but the last rule is that the energy polarity changes every time, right? So you've got either introverted, extroverted, introverted, extroverted, or extroverted, introverted, extroverted, introverted. So if we keep those rules in mind, we'll be able to determine types. All right, so we're going to start with the easiest permutation of the two, which is figuring out the 4 letters for a function stack. So I'll add a few rules as we go, but it's pretty easy. So first off, we want to know whether this is an introverted or an extroverted type, and this is simple. It's simply whether the first function is introverted or extroverted will determine this, right? So in this case, the first function is introverted feeling. So this is an introverted type. Then we have our perceiving preference and our judgment preference. So these are also pretty easy. It's just the first type that comes in the stack will be the one we put in the 4 letters. So in this case, we want to know whether this is an intuitive or a sensing type. The first perceiving function in the stack is introverted intuition, and so this is an intuitive type, right? And we do the exact same to figure out the judging function. So in this case, the first judging function is a feeling function. So we use a F letter, and the last part is the trickiest, but it's not super complicated. In order to know whether this is perceiving or judging favoring type, we simply look at the first extroverted function. So in this case, the first extroverted function is NE. NE is a perceiving function, and therefore this type will be considered to have a preference for sensing, for perception, because this is the first function that they extrovert to other people. And so in order to, we'll do the exact same process with a different function stack in order to understand. So we start again. We want to figure out the first letter. The first function in the cognitive stack, or the function stack, is extroverted. So it's an extroverted type. Then the first perceiving function in the stack is a sensing function. So this is a sensing favoring type. Then we want to see which of their judging functions they prefer, and the first judging function they have is syncing, so it's a syncing type. And lastly, we want to know whether they favor perception or judgment, and their first extroverted function is a syncing function, which is the judging function. So this function stack is ESTJ, and this one is the INFP. All right, now we'll do the second type of permutation, where we figure out the cognitive stack, or the function stack, from the 4 letters. So we follow a similar process, but it's a little bit more complicated this time. So first, we need to figure out the polarity of the first function. So as we can see, this is an extroverted type, which means that their first function is extroverted. And then we can fill in the order, because now we know that it's always one after the other. So this one will be introverted, this one will be extroverted, and this one will be introverted. Now what we want to do is we need to figure out, we know that the first 2 functions will be sensing and syncing, right? But we need to figure out in which order they go, and that's where the perceiving or judging information will come in handy, right? So in this case, this is a perceiving favoring type, and it's extroverted, which means that their first extroverted function, which is the first one, is a perceiving function, and their perceiving favorance, or preference rather, is sensing. So we know that that's the first function they have, and so the first function they have is extroverted sensing. So this means that their second function, which is introverted, is a judgment function, and their favorite judging function is syncing. which means that now we have the first two functions, and all we need to know is the first two, because now we can fill in automatically the other functions, because we know that they always work in pair with the outer pair and the inner pair, right? So the pair of Ti is always Fe, and the pair of Se is always Ni. And so now we've got the the function stack of the ESTP type. So we'll do the same thing with a different type, the INFJ. So we do this again. So first of all, it's an introverted type. So we know that the first function is introverted. And so we can fill in the other function logically. And so now we'll also look which type of function is their first extroverted function. So this is a judging. Their first extroverted function is a judging function, and their favorite judging function is feeling. So we know that this is Fe, and this leaves their other preference, which is intuition for perception. So we know the first two functions, and now we just need to fill in again. So what's the other function that's always associated in a pair with Fe is Ti, and the function that's always associated in a pair with Ni is always Se. And so now we figured out the function stack of this type. All right, so now as a little bonus, I'll show you a couple of fun ways, or, well, I mean, fun is subjective, but a couple of different types we can get that are related to each other based on a few permutation under in their stack. So in order to, so this will be the original type. From an original type, we can find their reverse, their shadow stack, and then their reverse shadow. In order to use an example, I'll use my own type, which is INTP. So the reverse type is a type where the stack is in the opposite order. So in this case, we start with the last one, and so on. So it starts with Fi, then Se, then Ne, and then Ti. So this would be the reverse type. So if we convert it, we'll get ESFJ. And so simply, if you want to figure it out by using the stack, you just have to use it in the opposite order. But you can also just figure it out from the 4 letters by just flipping every single letter in the type. So you just change it for its opposite, right? So if we say that we just keep, so this is the 4 original letters, here you just have to use the 4 different letters. So initially, if you're just starting as a MBTI, you might think that because it's got all the different preferences, it's the most different type from you that could exist. But actually, if you look at it, they share all the same functions, although it's in a different order. So you still have some points in common with these two types have points in common, and this would be the case with any other type you change with their reverse. They still have quite a lot in common. So now we'll see the shadow stack or type. So the shadow type uses this as the same order of preferences of type of function, but the energy polarity is reversed, right? So what's introverted will become extroverted, and so on. So to give an example with the INTP, Ti would become Te, Ne would become Ni, Si would become Se, and Fe would become Fi. So this is also in some series, or you have a shadow stack, and this would be the order of your shadow stack. And so if we use if we convert this into a 4-letter type, we'll get ENTJ. And so if you want to figure out this type, basically you just need to flip the 2 outer letters and keep the 2 middle ones. So you keep both of these and you flip those. So both the reverse and shadow types are sometimes said to be a golden pair. So that's kind of in the series about compatibility between types. Now, I personally don't. I'd say that like you shouldn't take compatibility theories super seriously because they're usually a little bit too simplistic, considering that an individual has a lot more complexity than a simple type. So in general, you know, I'd say take it with a grain of salt. But both of these types, reverse and shadow, are often said to be a golden pair, so a very good combination, because basically they're different yet similar. So in the case of the reverse type has all the same functions as you do, although it's in a different order, but so in a certain way you're a little bit complementary, as you're good at what you're bad at, and reverse, and the opposite is true. But you still share a lot of similarities. Now with the shadow type, they have no function in common with you, but they do share all your same preferences, right? So they also they'll have the same, they'll favor the same type of judging function, so thinking or feeling, and the same type of perceiving function in the same order. And that makes you in some ways different and in some ways quite similar. And so again, that's why it's considered to be a good compatibility. The last type I want to talk to you about is basically if you do the reverse of the shadow, you get one last type, and I'd argue this is actually the most different type from the original. So if we reverse this stack, right, we'll get Fi first, Si second, Ni third, and Te last, and this is the IFSP. And if you wanted to find it from the 4 letters, you would just keep the first and last and remove and flip the middle ones. So I'd argue this type is the most different from you because they don't share any single function with you. Not only that, but it's also completely in a different order, right? So they favor feeling first, and then, or in this case, right? So the IFSP favors feeling first. And again, if you, I won't get into the details of shadow function, but basically, what the function that comes the most naturally to you is the most alien to them, and this is true, and like this keeps being the case for every single function in the exact opposite order. So I'd say this is the type which is cognitively the most, different from you that there. So this is just like a little few fun permutations you can do as a little bonus. All right, I hope this video was clear enough and somewhat interesting. Thanks for watching.